We'll try to make it as exciting as OSHA can be.
I know you will, man. Got Chassis on here doing it, so yeah, it's going to be. I'm sure it's going to be exciting.
Everybody, go ahead and turn on your videos. It's easier than teaching to a black screen.
Okay.
There you go. Very good. Glad to see all the faces. Perfect.
Okay, guys. Hi, I'm Chastity Stutz. I'm from Preferred Insurance. I'm the Director of Risk Management here. Good morning, everybody. We're glad that you're here. Welcome to our annual OSHA Hot Topics and OSHA 300 recording seminar. Today's seminar is going to be broken into two segments. Our first segment is going to be the OSHA Hot Topics. That's going to be from 10 to 11. Our second segment is going to be the OSHA recording, and that's going to be from 11 to 12. We're pleased to be partnering with Matt Murphy from C Inc. He's going to be conducting this seminar. I'm just here to introduce him. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. Just please make sure that you remain on mute unless you're asking a question. You can also use the chat box to ask a question if you'd like, and then I will just kind of field those questions for Matt so that he can get to those. He's going to be concentrating on the presentation, so may not see the chat, so I'll help watch that for him. And then at the end, if you have questions, you can certainly ask them, or you can, like I said, put them in the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Thank you. Again, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I saw a couple chats that they didn't have cameras. That's not a problem. If the majority of you keep your cameras on, it just helps me teach a little bit. I kind of feed off of your feedback. I do have several screens around me. So if I'm looking away, it's not that I'm not paying attention to you. Actually, I'm looking at you here. I'm looking at the presentation. I've got another one over here. So we're going to get going here. The OSHA Hot Topics is probably the biggest thing that most people are looking at right now. There's a lot of regulatory items coming out this year. We're going to talk about some of that. I just talked to a federal inspector from West Virginia's federal program. So I spoke with him last week and kind of got some inside scoop, if you will, for some stuff that they're looking at doing and some timelines that they see it coming about with OSHA. So hopefully we'll be able to share that to you. I've got some resources in the chat. I also put my contact information, Matt Murphy, email safetymurph13@aol.com, and cell phone 703-930-2760. If you have any questions and they don't get answered here, by all means, just reach out. I'll be happy to answer them. Again, thank you for coming out. We'll get started here. When we talk about hot topics, we can't do that without the OSHA top 10. This is just what they're citing. So we'll take a look at those, kind of chat with them for the most part. Fall protection is, again, I think it's 18 years in a row, 19 years in a row, something like that. It's been a long time, but it's always been the number one issue, and it still is today. Fall protection is one of those things when you're driving by, you can see. Recording in progress. Thank you. Apparently it's being recorded. Fall protection is one of those things when you're driving by and, you look up on a building, you can see 4 or 5 people up there and they don't look like they're wearing harnesses. It's part of the fatal 4. So that gives OSHA kind of an invite to come in and do an inspection. Sorry, it's blocking my screen. Let me get that out of the way. Fall protection can be off scaffolding, it can be off roofs, it can be pretty much anything, right? When we're talking about construction fall protection, it's 6 feet or more. So that's not really a big difference. It's one of the biggest killers out of the fatal 4. So that's always been an issue. HazCom, this is 2020, 2021 respiratory took 3rd place. Just to let you know. Why do you think that is? Why did respiratory come up so much? Anybody? COVID, right? I mean, how many people were out there without masks? We kind of got used to being without masks. It's popping back up. They're getting more stringent again. And plus, how did they handle it? Did they have a program? These are all different citations that would pop up. So respiratory protection is, again, number 2 for 2021. And then HazCom came in number 3. We still have people in HazCom that, we still have MSDS binders out there. SDS, right? We've got to get those SDS binders up. That's been for the past several years. Make sure our people are trained on what GHS requirements are. So HazCom is just one of those things that gets cited all the time. I always suggest with my clients that they go for the online version of SDS. There's several softwares out there. If you want to reach out to me, shoot me something in the chat box or shoot me something on email, and I'll be happy to get you with some of those people. But it's just making it so easy to grab that information and put it in a systematic folder, and you can print off binders from it and stuff like that, and it's relatively cheap. I had one client that we were out on job site. They had an old chemical. OSHA loves finding that old ratty tag on there, and looks like you haven't used it for a little while, and just hand it to the guy and goes, find this chemical. And he wasn't able to do it. And I said, hey, grab your paperless Msds tablet, because he keeps his own tablet there. It's just an app on it. He pulled it up for me. I typed in the thing. It popped up. You don't have this included. Would you like to include it? I said, yes. Then I turned the tablet around and showed OSHA and said, see, right here, this is where the chemical information, it lives. And, we've got that. And he didn't look anymore. So that's one of those, it's cheap kind of insurance type deal. Scaffolding continues to be a big issue. A lot of people will go out there. They think, hey, I know everything I need to know about scaffolding. And it becomes a major issue, especially in construction. They put it up to the best of their ability or how they think it should be put up, and it's not quite right. So we need to make sure with any of these things we have a written program. We identify the hazards. We do training. We make sure everybody has a consistent kind of foothold there before they go out and do the job. But that's not getting done out there, and it's continuing to get cited. Ladders. How many people use ladders where you're at? Have you inspected them lately? Do you know what you're looking for? Do you have the right ladder for the right job? Again, construction's being hit more than anything, but that's ladders. General industry, lockout, tag out, and hazardous energy. If you have a piece of equipment out there, if you change a light bulb, if you do any of that, do you have that program in place? Lockout, tag out program. Do you even know what lockout, tag out means? It means we're going to physically put a lock on something. One lock equals one life. So if we have, say, 4 or 5 people working on there, we'll put a multi-lock hasp on. We'll click a couple of those items, and we, each employee has their own lock. They put it on, and when they're done, each employee takes their own lock off, and then we can get rid of that hasp, and then we can turn the energy back on. That keeps us from accidentally electrocuting people. So lockout, tag out still seems to be one of the big ones, and it's one of the fatal 4 as well. Powered industrial trucks. We still have forklifts out there. We're still not training our people how to use them, or our people are using them, but they're doing it unsafe, lifting up too much, not using a seat belt. General industry, I see it all the time where people jump on, jump off the forklift. They've never inspected it. All these things are citations. And when we talk about citations, remember the serious citations are over $13,000. So it's not cheap to get a citation. So we need to get ahead of that. Fall protection training requirements. There's so many of those. They broke it out to training requirements. So 1926-503, if you put them in a 6 foot or higher hazard, we need to train them. We need to train them what to look for, how to protect themselves, and all that sort of stuff. Eye and face protection for construction as well, hit the top 10, and machinery and machine guarding for general industry. Machinery guarding is almost a gimme a lot of times in general industry. We go out there and somebody somewhere is going to have one of those angle grinders. They're going to have the cup guard off, right? They're going to have, whatever it is, they're going to have the machine guard off for whatever reason, especially if belts on compressors are changed or any of those items. We gotta make sure those are back on. So that's the top 10. Anybody have any questions with the top 10? We're going to kind of break this down bite size. So for future use. All right, let's see.
Matt, there was one question. I'm not sure. Did you see Stephanie James's question?
I'm just going over there now. How do you get vendors to send you an SDS versus an MSDS sheet? Very good question. They are required by law to have SDS sheets. The problem is with some middleman vendor, I'll call it, they're not the manufacturer. You have to go to the manufacturer's website to find a lot of that. Unless it's a chemical that's not used anymore, we really don't have very many that don't have MSDS sheets or don't have SDS sheets. We ran into that for the past 5 or 6 years, and OSHA got a lot tougher on those manufacturers. So I would definitely go back to the manufacturer website. Yes, the person who you bought it from is supposed to be able to give you that SDS sheet, but it's not always going to be 100% of the time. I always, when I teach a 30-hour or teach a 10-hour, a lot of times I'll give homework, run by Home Depot, pick up something, and go up and ask for an SDS sheet for it, and just see what kind of look you get. It should be something that everybody does in construction, but nobody does it. So that's the difficult part. I know on the paperless system, you type it in, they find it, they put it in there, and then the nice thing about it is they keep it up to date. Okay, certain chemicals change throughout the year, and as far as OSHA is concerned, you need to keep up with those changes. I can't tell you any contractor or any business owner that has time to keep up with the changes of the chemicals that they're using. I didn't know PB Blaster changed its chemical format, or WD-40 added a chemical, or any of those type of things. So, they do it for you. So that's kind of why I push people to do that. We have any other questions so far?
Yep, there's one. Peggy. She was late logging in. She'd like to know what was the number one.
Number one's always the same thing, fall protection. It's been there for a long time, Peggy. I'd be happy to chat with you in between classes or whatever if you want any more information there. But yeah, fall protection is always a biggie. Any other questions? You can mic up and all that. I'll get that for you. Just shoot me some information. Look up above. You've got my email. Somebody else asked about the paperless app. Just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to get that for you. More than happy to do that. All right, so we'll wrap that part, and then we'll go into our next section here. Sorry, my little screen control is blocking my tabs here. So one thing that we talked about, obviously, because it's on everybody's mind, is COVID, right? We've got COVID plans that are required to be out there. If we have 100 employees or more, then there's a vaccine or testing mandate. I know it's getting fought in and out of court. I know there's a lot of lawsuits lined up against OSHA on this, but they're holding their ground. They're standing their ground, and they want to see this in place. If you do business in Virginia, the ETS from Virginia that came out a long time ago, ETS, Emergency Temporary Standard. If you look at the top of the screen, this is OSHA's ETS for inpatient hospitalizations, et cetera, due to OSHA. I'm sorry? Somebody. My screen's not sharing.
Yes.
Let me stop sharing and start back with this one. All right, try this again.
Sure. Should be able
Everybody see that?
What is your last name?
Yep, we can see it now.
Okay. All right, perfect. So as you can see, they keep updating this with the litigation update with what OSHA has out there. Comment period, which was over. There is talks, there may be another comment period, but the ETS is going to be put in. In fact, a lot of these hot topics that we're going to talk about, somebody has their mic on. Can we get that muted here? If you don't have a question. Can't see who it is. I think it's maybe Jordan. I don't know. So a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about when we talk about heat stress, that's one that's going to be coming up. That's going to be a little tough for some people to swallow, but it's coming. So we might as well look at it. COVID, the vaccination program, the infectious disease control plan that Virginia is required, California is required. I think a few other states have required it. It's now it's coming in, and now OSHA requires it. So we've got to really take a look at this and figure out what works for your company and what doesn't. This is a good website, though. This is right on OSHA's OSHA.gov. All this stuff came off of OSHA.gov, and if you just type in COVID-19 ETS, you'll get this information. And there's several different things in here. We talk about plans. So here are some different policy templates. If you're going to be talking about mandatory vaccination, there's a sample template there. Vaccination or testing, there's a and face coverings, there's a sample there. So both of those have a sample plan that you can download, you can use. Anything on the OSHA website you can use. I always use the joke in safety, it's all about R&D, right? Everybody knows what R&D stands for. Rip off and duplicate, right? We just make it our own, put our name on it. We like it, we keep it. So both of those are on here. Those are great. There's a bunch of fact sheets here. There's a bunch of information out there. People are, that I always say it's kind of like a game of Simon Says. You hear OSHA says this and OSHA says that, but what does really OSHA say? So they're trying to keep in front of that as well. If you want to take a look, general industry already has what they're going to for regulatory compliance in 1910 501 to 509. So vaccination, testing, respiratory protection program for people who are using filtering face pieces. All right. Remember, they told us to cover our face and do it with anything. And then, oh, we don't like just anything. We like, this type of product or that type of product. And we're showing that the better the face covering is, such as, your N95s and that sort of thing. But there's some problems behind that. If we put them in N95 or P100s, what do we have to do? We have to have a training program. We have to have fit testing. We have to do medical evaluations. So, there's some of that sort of stuff, but we can still use filtering face pieces. If you fly, if you fly a lot for your job, different airlines have different face covering policies as well. So be aware of those. And where this pops in at OSHA for the 1926 standards, anybody in construction over here, this is going to probably come into subpart C is what they're saying. So this is going to probably live there. We should see that here shortly, or it's going to be incorporated by reference. Then the fact sheets here. What is it? Here's the summary sheet. Did it pop up for you guys? Did that work? Good. Here's the summary sheet. You can take a look at it. Again, if you're 100 or fewer, it doesn't really apply to you, but it's going to come down to, well, what did you do? Please don't confuse that with Virginia's program. You still have to have an infectious disease control program if you work in the state of Virginia. You can simply Google OSHA's infectious disease control program, Virginia OSHA, and it'll pop up with it was an emergency temporary standard. They signed it into law. It stayed there. So at least you have to have a plan. Their thought process is it needs to be for more than just COVID, right? When we got hit a couple years ago, being told we're only going to have 2 weeks and we're going to flatten this curve. Remember all that fun talk? And we're going to get past all this stuff. And now it's a couple years later and we're still dealing with it. A lot of it was because we weren't prepared to handle anything like this. So now Virginia OSHA, and again, as several states have said, you really need to come up with at least a plan, right? You got to come up with a plan. You got to kind of figure out what's going on. Is there any questions so far? No? Just looking back here at the chat box real quick. Okay. Again, this has a lot of information on it. Few questions I always get on this, and it'll deal with record keeping and reporting. We'll probably cover it again then. How do I go about and figure out if COVID actually hits my record keeping issue? Well, we'll deal with that in the next session. One other question that I always get, and I just got clarity on it because OSHA just issued a statement not too long ago with the vaccine deal. If we're doing a mandated vaccine and we're dealing with adverse reactions from that vaccine, do we have to report it? Because as an employer, if we're requiring it under the standard, we would have to report it if the person's off for 5 days or 6 days or whatever they're dealing with from the vaccine. OSHA has stated that they are releasing employers currently from having to record or report that time off. So that's going to be an exclusion, and it'll be really good once they work that into the record keeping deal. So right now we do not have to do that part. And again, that just has to deal with the vaccine. So any questions with COVID and COVID plans, COVID policies? Again, you can key up your mic. You can put it in the chat box. No? Well then, moving right along. All right, let's let's go to stop share and go back to share screen. Kind of take this into, just to give you what this looks like. This is the Virginia specific standard for the COVID deal, by the way, or infectious disease control. It uses COVID throughout, but it's using that as a kind of a placeholder in case something else comes down the line. It started out, the STS was for SARS-CoV-19, but it's really for any infectious disease moving down the line. So pretty much you're going to train your employees washing their hands, social distancing, face coverings, proper testing, etc. Right. Somebody have a question? I can hear somebody's mic on. All right, again, if you don't have a question, feel free to turn your mic off. All right, share screen. Let's go back over here. Find it. Can everybody see the heat standard here? Heat stress. Give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Good. So one thing that I was a little shocked because they put it out for public comment for the heat stress standard that they're going to be trying to enforce this year. California already has a heat stress standard. A couple other states already have a heat stress standard. But when I talked to the federal officer, he said, yeah, we were told as of March, we will be enforcing and fining if people don't have a heat stress program. Now, this is going to be big for construction because if you're working outside, you're working in unconditioned buildings, that's going to be a major issue for you. You're going to have to monitor. There's a couple apps you can go to, which I can talk about here in a minute. But those apps, you can figure out what the work rest heat cycle is supposed to be. The big thing is they're putting it on the employer to go around and enforce somehow that if it's so many degrees outside and the humidity is a certain temperature, this employee is supposed to take a break every 40 minutes for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is on the chart. But you're supposed to somehow police that. So it's going to be put back to the employer. They haven't seen the full program yet, according to this officer, but they are thinking it's going to follow California standard, which means we are also, as employers, supposed to monitor their water intake, making sure they take in so many ounces per hour. Find this to be a very difficult at best, but that's what they passed in California. And since we have the person who ran California as our leader for OSHA, that's kind of what it looks like it's going to. So I would definitely keep an ear to this, especially since they haven't put it out. But this OSHA administration seems to be issuing more STSs than anything. It's these ETSs, emergency standards. Just because it gets it out there, people will fight it. They'll refine it. But then, if it's been rolling for 4 to 6 months and that they can show that in that 4 to 6 months, it's, protected so many lives, et cetera, it just gives them basic backing so that they can get this into a full blown standard. It's not like OSHA's been in the past. I've been doing this 20 plus years. And I can tell you when I first came in the industry, again, plus 20 years ago, they were excited because they were working on the CENRAC program. So it was a steel erection standard and a crane standard. Well, those of you who know, our crane standard still seems to be evolving. And, they just, a year or two, finally figured out what they're going to do for employer checking on the crane standard, or the employer is going to be responsible, kind of like forklift. They're responsible to make sure your crane operator's competent to run a crane. So that's been about 20 years to put that in place. With these emergency standards that they're putting out, they're putting something out there, they're enforcing them, and then they're fighting the court cases instead of giving, the 4, 6, 8 year window that it's usually been to create a new standard. NIOSH has a pretty good heat standard recommendation. NIOSH is also the one that has the app. So you can go to your app store, it's free. Download it, your temperature app. But the big thing behind any of these things is, number one, look at your program. You need to make sure you're protecting your employees in your program. B, train your employees to whatever you're going to do. So write your program down, train all your employees so they're all on the same page. And then C, so you've got your training, then it goes to enforcement. So those are the three things that almost everybody misses anytime they're cited. So it doesn't matter if it's fall protection, I'm up on a roof. First question, what's your written program? Do you enforce your written program? Do you train employees on that program? Same thing with any of these. COVID's going to be the same thing. Do you have your written program? Have you trained your employees on your COVID-19 program or your infectious disease control program? And are you enforcing it? And how are you enforcing it? So same thing that's going to come up with this heat stress plan. How are you making sure that your employees are taking those breaks? How are you making sure that they're drinking water? How, did you train them that they should, limit their alcohol? They should limit their caffeine on very hot days, and what effects that does. Even the urine color analysis charts, they're going to want to see those posted somewhere so people understand, am I dehydrated or not? So these are all parts and pieces that we're going to see. Questions on the heat standard deal. And it's going to be that work, rest, shade deal. So where are you going to have your shade set up? Where are you going to have your rest area? And this ties right in with COVID again, right? When COVID first came out, we masked everybody. That was great. But what happened? They took a break. They went to one area. They all took their masks off. They ate, they talked, they did whatever. And then we started seeing the spread and transmission. So the shade deal is going to have to be a little worked out as well. I've seen certain job sites, they have this great big tent with all these tables, and 50 workers walk in there and take their masks off and sit down and drink some water and talk to each other for 5 minutes, then get up, go back to work. Well, what else do you think they're doing, right? So we've got to keep that in the back of our mind when we're doing these plans as well. I don't see the chat box, so did I have anything pop up there for questions? Go ahead, key up your mic. I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, so my question is, like, for example, my company works in paving. So during the summers, if we're doing work in neighborhoods and stuff like that, which is what we do a lot during the summertime, we get a lot of civilian complaints about our guys taking breaks in like shaded areas that's technically on their property. So my question is, what would you suggest to kind of mitigate that issue, but still give them the shaded areas they need to be able to take the breaks and everything necessary?
I think that's going to be a tough one, to be honest with you. I think those 10 by 10 tents that people buy all the time, I think you're going to see those go up a little bit because a lot of companies are going to be buying those little tents. And how are you going to keep them from flying in the road and doing this, that, and the other? If you're in paving, I can tell you right now, that's going to be a tough deal because you're right in the middle of laying pavement. And then, whoops, my 40 minutes is up. I got to go sit down for 5 minutes and drink water. We're going to have to look at those admin protocols. How do you stagger your people? And especially in a field where it's hard to find people right now, right? So you're already depleted. It's not like I can hire 3 more and just do my worksite rotation and I'm good. I got to find those people to hire. Then I got to train them and all that good stuff too. So, yeah, it's going to be a rough deal for you. I can tell you that, getting in the trucks, see that all the time. 4 or 5 people pile into one of those crew cab dualies and, they all masks off and everything else. And then, next week they're all on your COVID list and you can't use them next week. That's a big problem. Who else? Other questions on this one? All right, then we'll open it up to oh, I've got one more thing to share. Sorry. Did NEPs pop up on your list here? Does everybody see that? Directive NEP? Perfect. So one thing that you need to pay attention to, depending on what industry you're in, is national emphasis programs and local emphasis programs. So I don't know everybody, if they're all in this region, you can look up this region's LEPs, but NEPs are huge. Why? Because these are all tickets for OSHA to walk right into your job site. So in order for OSHA to pop by, there has to be a few things. One, an employee complaint, right? Number 2, an injury, because you have to let OSHA know if you have an injury or, we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. And then also if they drive by and they see something in the fatal 4, so falls from, struck by, caught between electrocutions, or it's in this emphasis program, either regional or local. The heat stress and the COVID will be NEPs this year. And as you can see, when we go through this, coronavirus, COVID-19 is already there. So they're already enforcing it. Basically, they're told when they go to a construction site, there's two things that they want to see right away: infectious disease control program, and what is your heat stress program after March. Heat stress, they're targeting March, which probably means June or July for us, but let's be ahead of the curve and not waiting until the last minute. So combustible dust, it's been around since 2008. It stays going. So if you have something, general industry more than likely dealing with combustible dust, then make sure you're under the program there. Again, COVID-19, we're going to get a new one coming out for 2022. That's going to stay around. Hazardous machinery. I can tell you a couple steel plants and a couple of different processing type plants just got letters that they are on the list this year, meaning there's a high hazard industry that's produced a lot of accidents. When you turn in those OSHA 300 forms through OSHA, if you're one of those companies that have to do that, they take that data and they really look at what are the accidents happening. So hazardous machinery, if that's part of what you do, they're sending a lot of letters out right now going, just understand we're going to step up our enforcement in your area. So you may want to get ahead of this and make sure your machinery is all good to go. Hex chrome's been around since 2010. It hasn't went anywhere. So if you've got a welding shop, stainless and stuff like that, anything that produces hex chrome, you've got to be careful with. It's some pretty bad stuff. Lead's been around forever. 2008 is the NEP. Metal industries, again, 2014. Process safety management. So if you're in chemical manufacturing, that's been out since 17. It's still there. Ship breaking. Silica. Silica is huge. If you cut something dry and you don't vac it, you're not in table one, and they see a dust cloud, they are pulling in. So that dust cloud, you might as well look at it as a big neon sign that says, hey, OSHA, I obviously don't know what the standard is. Please come cite me. And when silica gets cited, you saw that respiratory protection being number 2 now. Silica is A, very visible, B, very deadly. And one way that we were talking about, we had some instructors in a room last week, and we were talking about ways to train on silica. People don't understand how little bit of silica is beyond the action level. So what the one guy said is he takes a packet of sugar, lays it on the table, breaks it into quarters, then takes a quarter and breaks it into a quarter. So you have just a little bit of, few sugar granules, and that's beyond the limit. So it's just really a visual to draw people in to understand when that dust is up and going, that's entering your lungs and is a huge problem. There's a good video. If you don't understand what silica does to you and why it's so important, we deal with silica even sweeping. So if you have a warehouse and you're sweeping, you have to have a silica control program. It's not just construction. So understand that it's huge. It's not going away. And a lot of people die from silicosis or issues from silicosis every year.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jason. Whenever you're ready, Jason. Trenching excavation also continues to be a huge topic. We still have trenches. We're still killing people, especially summertime. We get the kids who are helping out for the summer. They're working on their parents or with their parents in a trench or excavation. It's absolutely sad, but we see a lot of kids in unsafe trenches that get hurt and killed every year. So we've really got to pay attention to that, really got to train them correctly. So, subpart P, understanding laybacks, understanding soil types, all that stuff needs to be there. So Any questions so far?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chastity. Yes, this is Russell Harden with Anderson Mechanical. I have a question about Silica. How will they handle like trash chutes on a job site, or when the concrete subcontractor has to dump, his clamshells and all the dust goes in the air, or gravel trucks coming on a job dumping? How are they going to handle that exposure?
They're going to leave it up to you to handle that. So if you don't live in table 1, which none of those issues you just talked about are in table 1, right? So OSHA has a table 1, and that's a lot of stuff. That's cutting brick and block inside, outside. It's cutting a lot of stuff. But like you said, trash chutes, kind of the thought process is if I'm throwing it into the trash chute, most of the dust is going to be on the bottom side. So as long as nobody's around that dumpster that it's dumping into, it really shouldn't be an issue. If it is, then water's your best option, right? Get that dust down by water. That's how most of that's controlled. But dumping dumping stone, stay in the truck, keep the windows up, dump the stone, don't have anybody around, but people want to be there when you dump because they want to see the dump truck bed tilt and stuff fly out. Get them away. You want to be outside that breathable area for that dust. So they leave it up to you. Most of what OSHA writes is what's called performance standards, right? They tell you have to meet a certain level of satisfaction. It's up to you how you get there. It's just like training. Everybody asks me, how long do you have to be in a training class to be a competent person? OSHA doesn't have a time limit. It can be 2 hours. It can be 20 hours. It can be however long you deem it to be to make you, a competent person. If you're a competent person, you pretty much have the keys to the castle. What you say, it goes. So, make sure you go there. Hopefully that answered it. There might be some more follow-up. Feel free to key it up. We got plenty of time for questions. So I'd love to assign everybody, come up with a question for me real quick. That'd be good. We can finish out this session with just questions with safety. It doesn't have to be with what we've done so far. Anything you go, well, I heard this one time, ask me, I'll tell you where to find the information. Hopefully, if not, I'll go find it and get it to you. Anybody else?
Hey, Matt, this is Jason, Nevada.
There you go.
So I work in a construction excavating company. So, I ran into an issue. So we had a trench. It was probably 9 feet deep. We had our shields in place, and we ran into like a huge boulder that was too big for us to take out with our excavator. So we ended up jackhammering. So it's a pretty confined space. We were in the trench jackhammering, and it was like causing a lot of dust. So I had my guys, put on respirators, but I mean, even just with the respirator, I know like if we're using like a saw, we got to use water, but I didn't want to introduce water into the bottom of my trench. It was just kind of a hard, I don't know. I just didn't like it, Do you have an idea on how to?
Yeah, sure. Well, they all come with money, right? Solutions always cost money. Yep. So in that situation, there's, kind of a check down of a few different areas. One, if you can get somebody to rock saw through it, hire a rock saw to come in. We can go straight up and down in trench that's been rock sawed and it doesn't have any fissures, cracks, there's no chance of caving in, but we can cut right through solid rock. Another thing is get a machine with that hoe ram on it. So, an excavator, mini excavator, whatever it is, but get your person out of there and in an enclosed machine with HEPA filters. So a lot of your enclosed cabs now have HEPA filters. So remove the employee from that hazard.
This was a difficult situation because where we had this trench was up alongside of a railroad. So, and the access into that railroad was all we could get was a mini excavator in there. That's just how it was designed with, it was at a petroleum plant.
Sure.
So, because I thought about that because we have a rock crusher, we could have just brought our big excavator in there and it would have taken it out. But, it was just all these little.
Well, that mini X, they fit, a little hammer on that too. So if you
Yeah.
get Mini X with an enclosed cab, I would have used that and got your employees out of there.
Yeah.
In a situation like that, good luck controlling the dust. You know, like you said, you introduce water in there. What are we doing? We're compromising the soil around it.
Yep.
And if we put a respirator on, how long is that respirator going to be without it clogging up? So we really need to figure out, you know, maybe even drop in one of the little remote boxes, you know, the little mini skid loaders that have a hammer on it that you can drive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's some options, but
yeah.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? So yeah, asked everybody to come up with a question. Who has? Not everybody at once now. These are the main parts of the OSHA Hot Topics right now. You know, the other big stuff is, again, always going to be the fatal force. So always take a look at that. Training is always an issue. I will say that I can't tell you a company I go into that we don't find where they lack some kind of training. So make sure you take a look at it. We'll take a look again in the next session, but if you're hopping off in this section and not joining us for the next session, then I will go over a couple quick things. Number one, as far as COVID's concerned for record keeping, one big thing I want you all to know, and you can look it up, is the reporting process in case of a fatality. So if you've figured out that it's work related and the person's hospitalized and maybe they're in the hospital for months, or they come home and it's still part of that and they're still not healed and they pass away, you still have to report that. And there is no time limit on that except for the 8 hours from the time you find out. So unfortunately, you have somebody who's work related. It's been proven that it's work related. They're in the hospital. You find out a month or two from now that, you know, unfortunately they've passed on due to that COVID. You are still responsible to contact OSHA and let them know and report the fatality. So that's a big one. We'll talk a little bit about what is work related in the next session, but I did want to make sure that information's out there because there have been a few people that unfortunately needed to use that. So we just want to make sure. If you're in construction, another thing that we're going to go over in the next session too, but March 2nd is your date to have your OSHA forms posted. So go into OSHA and post those. So those are a couple things I want to make sure everybody has if you're not joining me for the next session. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got another quick question.
Yeah.
As far as like OSHA reporting is concerned and stuff, I had an incident a couple weeks ago where one of my guys was doing traffic control work and was intentionally struck by a civilian in their vehicle. Now, the employee has previous injuries from, you know, previous lifestyles and stuff like that, and it exacerbated that pain. Is that still a situation where it would need to be recorded, even though it wasn't like they were actually injured at the time, but it did exacerbate their general pain that they have from previous injuries?
Yeah, that's significant re-aggravation. So yeah, so there's two things. If they've already had an accident, we're going to go over this in the next session, but if they've already had an accident, they've already experienced pain and injury, and they are still on a treatment program, so they have not healed to the top of the fullest extent, then it would be added on to that original injury. If they had healed, or it's previous to even employment, whatever it is, you know, that's one big myth that a lot of people have. If I hire this person, well, he gave me a note that says he has a bad back, or she said she has a bad hip, or whatever. If they slip, they get hurt, they get whatever, they re-aggravate that injury at work. Now you own that injury. So yeah, that's going to be, you know, a recordable, and it's probably going to be a work comp claim. Yep, for sure. And of course, your work comp's going to go after this person who intentionally hit them, most likely, but that's a whole deal for another day. Any other questions? Okay. Well, there's the KN95s that you can use. You can use surgical masks still. There is a guidance for what type of cloth face covering you have. So take a look at OSHA, that one OSHA thing that I posted, and look at the one, especially where it goes over face coverings. If not, look up the new OSHA standard under 1910. I believe it's 501, 50. Let me see if I can find that again real quick.
Yeah, it's 1910, 501 through 509.
Yeah. I think face coverings is right in the first couple of sections there, but take a look at that, and that should answer your question. N95, remember, if you outfit them with an N95 or greater, and it's not for voluntary use, which following your program will not be for voluntary use, there is a fit testing, there is a training, there is a written program, there's a change schedule program. That's another thing that's been a problem with these masks, or what do you do with those masks, right? I see a lot of people, they put them on, they take them off, they hang them on their rear view mirror, they do whatever. You got to understand how masks work. If you want it to help you, then you have to treat it, like anything else. If you're walking into a ward and you know that it's a hot territory and everybody's got COVID in there, you're going to wear that mask to its fullest extent. And as soon as you get to a clean area, you're going to take it off and dispose of it and get a new one, next time you need to go in. We're not doing that. We're going to the grocery store, we're going to the restaurant, we're going wherever, and we're using that same mask without cleaning it for months at a time. So that's where they're hitting you on some of these programs. So understand the use of filtering face pieces. That's what they're going to call them. N95 masks are a filtering face piece, really. So other questions? These are pretty good. Chassis, is anybody not in the second session, or is there anybody we're going to have to wait for the second session, or can we take like a minute break and then jump into the second session? Okay. Okay. Then if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and break here. We'll jump back at 11, and then we'll start our record keeping session. Thank you, everybody who decided to come out. Appreciate you taking advantage of this. It's great to work with Preferred. It's great to be there with them. We're safety consultants. So if you ever need anybody for that sort of deal, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you out. Let us know you work with Preferred. You do get a discount. So it's kind of important that you let us know that. So, but we will chat here in a little bit. See you at 11. All right, looks like 11 o'clock. I guess we can get started on our next session. Chastity, did you want to reintroduce?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Chastity Stutz. I'm from Preferred Insurance. I'm the Director of Risk Management here, and welcome to everybody. This is our second session. This is the OSHA recording training conducted by Matt Murphy from C Inc. We're pleased to be partnering with him, and we're pleased that you're all here to join us. If you have questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can type your question into chat, and I'll let Matt know that the question has been asked, or you can raise your hand. I would ask that you just please remain on mute if you don't have a question. That way we can eliminate background noises. All right, take it away, Matt.
Perfect. Thanks again to Preferred for having me here. We usually like to do this at least once a year, so it's timely.
Recording stopped.
Recording stopped. Okay.
1 sec.
If you would go ahead and turn on your videos. Keep your mics off, but turn on your video.
Recording in progress.
Good to see everybody again. We're good on the recording, right, Chastity? Okay. We have a lot to go over. So record keeping and reporting. I don't know how many of you are new to this. And, if you could throw in the chat box, if you're actually completely new, that's great. I'm going to be kind of zooming through this. So please feel free to throw something in that chat box, throw your hand up, or even just stop me as I go through. because we're going to kind of take the kind of a breeze through this since we only have an hour. So again, learning objectives, we want you to understand OSHA's record keeping requirements, define when to post and what forms to actually post, identify how to determine if a COVID case is recordable, and differentiate first aid only cases from recordable cases. So we're going to talk about all of that. Moving right along, maybe. There we go. So OSHA's record keeping rule, just really briefly, we're required to do it. Part of what OSHA stands by is, in order to write standards or change standards, is to understand what's hurting people or what's disabling people or whatever. So there's a whole reason for that. You may get a notice from Department of Labor or BLS. Those are the two companies or two entities that may shoot you a notice saying that they would like a copy of your next year's or this year's forms. They make it sound nice and like it's an option. It's not, I promise you. If you don't do that, they'll send you another little letter showing you how big the fines are if you don't participate in said program. And just to let you know, if there's nothing sharing, okay. Go back to this thing again. Now, does everybody see it?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right. One thing to understand also is that just because it's recordable may not mean it's compensable. So there's some different differentiations there, understanding the differences. I get some people who think because they paid for it and, they didn't go to workers' comp, they don't have to record it. Not necessarily true. There's a whole lot that goes into that. If you have questions, we'll talk as we go. All right. Who has to keep records? If you have 10 or more employees at any time during the calendar year, you must keep records. You must keep your OSHA 300 logs. There's a few different parts of this: OSHA 300, OSHA 300A, and OSHA 301. 301, most people use what's called a first report of accident. Or their own in-house forms, and they have at least that much information on there. So most people don't necessarily use that, but just to let you know, the other two are required. There's a low hazard industry exemption. If you go to the list, you can take a look. If you're a boat salesperson, I think they're back off the list. There's a few others that are off the list, so we'll just go from there. So what is work-related? I usually like to break it down into a 5-step process. 1904 is where we're going to find this. And this is probably one of the better written standards OSHA's put out, actually, because there's a lot of almost question and answer type conversational language that they used. It's not, thou shall and thou should. It is, is there an injury? Is it work-related? Here we go, and we'll figure it out. So the 5-step process is pretty simple. Did the employee experience an injury or illness? Yes or no, right? Check it off. And you can take this and, they've got it all over the place. Or you can take a screenshot of this and make your own checklist. We're not jumping ahead. We're taking them one at a time. Was it work-related? What is work-related? And we'll get into that. If yes, we keep moving. Is it a new case? In the last session, we had somebody ask, if they had a previous injury and it got re-aggravated, how would we go through that? And we'll figure that out too. Yes or no. Then, does the injury or illness meet the general criteria or the application to specific cases? If yes, we record the injury. If we rolled our ankle going into work, we went to the hospital to get an x-ray, x-ray was negative, we're going to be a little bit sore, but we can go back and do our normal function. That's not going to be recordable. Now, if we got pain medication and prescription medication, it'll be recordable. So we got to kind of take a look at some of that stuff too. So what is an injury or illness, right? It's an abnormal condition or disorder. All right. Sprains, cuts, fractures, amputations, items in eyes, all kinds of stuff. So we all understand that. Determine work relatedness. Are you there as part of your job. So going to the office on your day off because somebody's leaving and you wanted to go to their birthday party or their going away party or whatever it was, and you slipped on ice and you busted your butt and you got a couple stitches, that's not going to be work related. Why? Because you were there as part of general public that day. You weren't there for work purposes. Now, let's just grab somebody's screen name. I see a Chris on there. If I say, hey, Chris, stop by Home Depot and pick up a couple buckets of mud because we got to finish up this drywall project, and he goes and picks it up, cranks the back, could that be work related? Well, yeah, because I sent him there to get it. Same thing. If I say, hey, Ryan, go out and get us, breakfast sandwiches for everybody, and we're going to have this great meeting, and Ryan gets hurt doing that, it's work related. We sent him to do it there. Okay. Again, we're not looking at what's compensable and what's not. We're looking at what's going to end up on the OSHA log. So what about pre-existing injuries? Again, a lot of people, especially in this climate where there's not a lot of skilled employees to choose from out there, they'll take some people with, the lower back problems, the knee problems or whatever. And some people are being very honest when they get hired. They say, hey, listen, I just want to let you know, I can be a really hard worker, but there's some days where my knee just goes out and, I'm going to need something a little lighter duty, or my back is a problem. I can't pick up over it, but so much. And people are going, we need bodies. We'll hire you. We'll hire you. Well, this is going to be a big issue for your reportability, because if they significantly aggravate that, it's going on your OSHA 300 form. It's your case now. You bought it. All right. A lot of companies have decided to do pre-hire exams. So they set up with an OCDOC. They set up the, hey, we go upstairs a lot. We pick up a lot of weight. We transfer weight from one shelf to another shelf, whatever it may be. And they go over it and they have that scenario. And before they're hired, they can do a fitness for duty exam. So they can go out there, they can get their drug test, their fitness for duty exam, and all that sort of stuff. And then you get a yes or no from the OCDOC. Yeah, I'd suggest hiring this person, or I don't. The problem is, now that it's harder to find people, we're seeing people drop that program. Well, they come with pre-injuries. That's what you're going to pay for. So just be careful about that. And that's what's going to go into your OSHA 300 log. That's also going to, deal with your EMR and all that. So just be conscious of that when your boss goes, but I need 10 people and I don't care who they are, just get them in here. That's going to bite a lot of people in the butt. All right. I have a lot of people who are growing by leaps and bounds. And the one thing that's been the common thread to those that are having a lot of injuries is that's exactly their hiring practice right now. They forgot about the new hire orientation. They forget about some onboarding issues. They just need people. And I get it. But the problem is, when you do that, you're opening yourself up to a can of worms. So very important to get with the insurance people on here and make sure your policy covers everything that you need to cover, because you're going to be buying some injuries if you do it that way. All right. Exemptions. Again, if you're there as just a member of the general public, you've got symptoms arising in the work environment that are solely due to non-work related exposure. Let's say, you have, a skin disorder or something like that, and it's just flaring up. That's not going to be anything for the employer to do unless it's something that in the employer's environment. Voluntary participation in a wellness program, medical, fitness, or recreational activity. I always have to share these stories, right? So voluntary participation, very important there. So if we put a blood drive on at work and, you donate blood and you pass out, well, you were there as a volunteer, it's not recordable. If we have a rec softball team and I've hired you because you are just a killer at softball and you're okay at work, so I'm going to keep you as an employee, but part of your work agreement says you're going to go play softball for me because I want that trophy at the end of the year. Well, you slide in and blow your knee out, that is work related. All right. That's what you were hired for. You go, well, nobody would do that. I beg to differ. I have clients that have done that before. So you got to be careful. Eating, drinking, or preparing food or drink for personal consumption. I call this the Bagel Rule. So a decade or so, whenever bagels were the only thing you took to meetings, everybody cut those bagels and got them ready, and they cut against their hand. And we had several times people would get stitches. Well, if you're enjoying that bagel for yourself, okay, then it's not a recordable. You go get stitches, whatever, that's kind of on you. You're preparing your own food. But if you're doing it for the office, then guess what? Now it's a reportable. So we got to watch out for that. Personal tasks outside of assigned working hours. Let's say, there's a shop there and you need to work on your vehicle, and you ask your owner or your manager or whatever, can I use the bay and, put new brakes on my vehicle, and you get hurt doing it. It's not recordable. You were there outside of working hours for your own personal benefit. Personal grooming, self-medicating, non-related, intentionally self-inflicted. Had this on a site. We had the people out there. Somebody said they slipped and fell going into the elevator. Sure enough, we've got video of them coming in. They slipped a little bit. That was true. But then they backed up and took a running start at where they slipped, and whoop, bam. So self-inflicted. We found it on video, and that's not going to be any part of that. Motor vehicle accident in parking lot, access road, anywhere during the commute. When they're in their vehicle, it is not a recordable. Okay. That's a DOT issue. That's a whole different issue. It's when they go to step out of that vehicle that now you own them. And every couple of years, ICE this time of year, I always get, George was getting out of the truck and stepped on the running board and slipped and bam, hit himself in the parking lot. And we actually had one happen, and the gentleman was an older gentleman, blew out his hip. He was out of work for a good long time, and it was work related. Why? Because he ended his commute. Once he opens his door and he's walking into your building or walking on the work site, he's yours. So that becomes recordable.
Matt, we have a couple questions in chat.
Sure. Go ahead.
So our first question is from Joy Anderson. What about driving a company vehicle?
So while they're driving, not recordable. So if they're in an accident, they get banged up, and that's, that may be workers' comp issue, but again, it's not a recordable issue. They weren't on the job at the time. What if two of them, what if they are in a company vehicle? Again, that's not recordable as far as OSHA's 300 form. You're still going to have to do accident investigation. You're still going to have to deal with all that, but that's on a separate part of it. Was that the only ones? Sorry, I'm scrolling through real quick. There you go. Okay.
I have a follow-up question to
Sure.
the employee being struck by a civilian vehicle. If that employee is the safety coordinator, i.e. the person who generally takes care of the OSHA logs and all of that kind of stuff, are they the one required to do the reporting, since that's normally what they do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no difference there. As long as they can, unfortunately, or if they're okay enough, yes, that's part of their job. Yeah. Common cold or flu. Obviously, this is changing with COVID. We'll get into COVID in a little bit, but common cold or flu that goes around. They at first they were going to exempt it under this regulation, and then there were so many, and it became a huge fun deal that we're dealing with now. So mental illness, unless the practicing health care provider can prove that it's work related. So PLHCP has to say, it's work related stress that's the reason this person is having a mental issue, and they need some time off and that sort of thing. Then it may become recordable. They might need medication. That's going to become recordable. Mental health, I think you're going to hear a lot in the next 2 years. It's being identified more and more. I don't know if anybody's ever had to deal with a mental health issue before, but lost 2 people in my life, and one was a person who worked for me that just didn't make it through depression. So depression got the best of them, and happy people when you talk to them, but other stuff just piled up. So it's definitely something we need to look out for, just as on the human side of this deal. Keep those questions coming in. I don't mind them. That's why I use PowerPoint, just so I can go back and figure out where I'm at. So travel, here's a good one for you. If you're out of town and you're there on work assignment and you slip in the shower, taking a shower, and bust your arm and break it, is it a recordable? Not necessarily. Why? Because you've established what's called home away from home. So once you go, you've established your hotel, you're going to your hotel, It's just like you showed back up at home. So that's the home away from home deal. Now, if you're working from home, which, hey, now we've got a lot of people who are, and it's work related, and we can prove it's work related, it's still reportable. I had a young lady who was an office manager. She fell, hurt herself pretty good. They sent me to her house to do an accident investigation. This was years ago. And I always tell this story because when I got there, they even told her, hey, listen, our safety person's going to show up and just do a quick, follow up and accident investigation, and made sure it was okay with her. Yeah, that's fine. What would you do if I was coming to your house to do an accident investigation? Anybody? Maybe clean up, right? I got there and it looked like, a toy store had puked all over the place. There were kids running around all over the place. They were about the same age group. So it was really starting to click for me that these, however many there were, 8 or 9 kids running around between the ages of 3 and 5 may not all be hers. So in the investigation, I'm going, okay, so what were you doing? And she showed me where the garage was, and you had to kind of weave through all these toys. And she had a little desk way over in the corner. And that's where she was doing her work for the company from. And she honestly probably tripped over a toy and fell and hurt herself. But I said, okay, well, what's going on here? I need to be a little more clear because there's kids everywhere. And she goes, oh, well, my employer doesn't need to know, but I run a daycare now that I work from home. And it's like, well, that is an issue, and we will discuss that. So it has to be figured out. Was it the work-related part of it that got it done, or was it the secondary job she was doing at the same time that got it done? I think with the working from home that a lot of people are going to be doing now, we're going to have to deal with this a lot more. So understand that. Is this a new case? So if somebody has, a work-related issue and they're coming back, there's certain cases you want to see closed out as soon as possible, and you want them to move on from. Stitches, I want it closed out as soon as possible and move it on from it. Things like backs, shoulders. Yeah, we want it closed out, but do we really want it closed out? Because there's kind of a double-edged sword there. If the person's doing their job and they're still under the doctor's orders, we have that incident. Let's say it was November of this past year, 2021, and they were out for a couple of weeks, but they're back and they're on, kind of light duty, and they've worked through light duty, but they're still under medical supervision, and they get re-injured or they significantly aggravate it. That's just going to be a continuation of last year's accident. So we're just going to add days to that last year's accident. We're just going to add data to last year's accident for record keeping issues. If in December they got an all clear that they have substantial, not substantial completion, but whatever the medical term is for it, but they're back as good as they're ever going to be again. And they're off of doctor's orders. They don't have any follow-up, none of that sort of stuff. They're away from medical review. They're still going to come back into work. They've been released, and now they get the same injury again. Well, then now it's a new case. That's the difference. So, being safety managers, HR managers, that sort of deal, that becomes kind of a little slippery slope. Yes, we want to get these things closed out and get them back, but we don't want to push it beyond what it's going to take to them to get back to 100%, right? We got to be careful of that. And we have to always follow medical advice. So I get some people that go, the doctor had no idea what they're talking about. They really only needed X, Y, and Z. Well, unless there's an MD behind your name, you don't get to say that, okay? You may have an opinion, but you can keep that to yourself because it's not going to matter much. General record keeping criteria. So the things we definitely have to do: death, days away from work. We restrict their work activity. We transfer them to another job. We have medical treatment beyond first aid. And again, we'll differentiate between the two here in a minute. They have loss of consciousness or significant injury diagnosis by, again, a healthcare provider. We need to record it. 1904.7. And again, you can Google any of this stuff. When I give you that number, just Google OSHA 1904.7. It'll put you right in the standards, and you can kind of check through them on your own. Types of days away. Yep.
Matt, we have a question.
Sure.
In chat. It's from Chrissy. Would the OSHA log from the previous year need to be updated for days off or light duty if injury isn't closed out and additional days happen in the next year?
Correct. Yes. So this is kind of the perfect time of year to talk about that. So if December 15th, the person got hurt, they go on last year's log for December 15th. They don't go on this year's logs. Now the case may carry over, or it may get re-aggravated this year. We just continue updating that log until our max 180 days runs out, and then we just maxed out at 180. So hopefully that, here we go, cap count 180, right? May stop the cap count if employee leaves the company for a reason unrelated to the injury or illness. So they decide, you know what, I don't want to be on light duty. I can go make more doing something else. By all means, go do something else. We can end that cap count. It's done. If a medical opinion exists, obviously we have to follow it. Types of cases. Restricted work cases. Again, the person can come back, but they can't come back 100%. You know, maybe, and this is important to know when you have a aggressive back to work program. Highly suggest you have a back to work program. We want people in the work mindset. If you let them sit at home, what comes on at 12 o'clock? Well, pretty much 9 to 3 o'clock. What comes on? What commercial? Have you been hurt at work? You know, make those suckers pay.com, right? Get them back into the workplace. Plus, how many hours do you spend at the workplace, right? Or with your workers? Usually almost more than you spend with your family. If you get them out of that sync and they've been out for, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, it's really hard for them to break back into that. So it's important as an employer to work on getting them back to work. So if they come back, but they're restricted, okay, well, we check the restricted box and we go down through there. And we'll get to boxes here in a minute. B4, we talk about restricted cases. Musculoskeletal discomfort. They determine that they're not able to perform a function, any of their routine functions, they assign them a work restriction. All right. If you're dealing with a OCDOC, if you're dealing with who's over there, like a Nova or, Corpo HS or any of those type of people, it's important for them to know what your light work looks like. Maybe I have something in the warehouse where they can sort bolts. Maybe I have something where they can file, answer phones, something that they can do with using their hands only, something to do with, basically using their left arm only or right arm only, just have those different things. Think about those injuries and what they could be, go over it with them. And it's much easier for those OCDOCs to assign restricted work rather than days off. All right. Job transfer. Again, you can't do your normal job, so we're going to sit you out there. And I heard a paving contractor and a trenching excavation contractor on here. You're going to give them the clipboard, and they're just going to count trucks in and out. That might be part of their job. Then there you go. Then that's you're transferring their job over to other duties. So you just click on that box, and then how many days that they had to be transferred. Again, we have to medical treatment. Medical treatment may or may not mean it's recordable. If they go to a doctor to get checked out because they got hurt, they get an x-ray, that x-ray is negative, they don't get a prescription, they go back to work the next day, that's not a recordable. All right, that's an injury, but it's a first aid only injury. They got patched up, they got whatever, and they went home. They got back to work the next day. If it's a positive break, if they receive sutures, if they receive medications beyond a tetanus shot, then it's going to probably be a recordable. First aid, using non-prescription medication at non-prescription strength. I'll say that again, non-prescription medication at non-prescription strength. When we deal with OCDOCs, a lot of times they run into if you just take 4 Advil or 2 Aleve or 3 Aleve or whatever it is, well, now you're getting up to the prescription strength, but you're buying it over the counter. Then it's a recordable. It's really if they can manage it with over-the-counter medication at over-the-counter strength that it'll keep you out of that side. Tetanus immunizations. You get a tetanus shot, that's not necessarily recordable. All right. If you get a tetanus shot and then you get stitches, now it's recordable. Cleaning, flushing, soaking surface wounds, wound coverings, stair strips or butterfly bandages. Notice that doesn't say glue. Okay, that's not there. Hot or cold therapy. You use a little non-rigid means of support, so a soft brace of some sort, and temporary mobilization. All those are first aid only. They do not end up on your OSHA 300 report without something else to go with it. Drilling fingernails, draining fluids from blisters, eye patches, removing foreign bodies from eye, including irrigation or cotton swab, first aid. Removing splinters or other foreign materials by irrigation, tweezers, or cotton swab in any other part, not including the eye. That's first aid. Finger guards, drinking fluids for relief of heat stress, massages, those are all first aid. So take a look, make sure you kind of stay between the lines there and make sure you record what actually needs to be done. Using non-prescription medication at prescription strength is considered medical treatment. If you use sutures or staples, it's medical treatment. So all that would be recordable. Let's take a look at this. Is it recordable? Sam twisted his back while lifting a shipment of boxes. He just put some ice on it for a couple hours and went back to work. So let's think back to that number one. And those of you who can turn on your cameras, do so, especially now. Did Sam get experience a injury? Yes or no? That's step one. How many people say yes? How many people say no? Okay. Well, he experienced an injury. He twisted his back, so he put some ice on it. That we went there, right? What's the next level, right? Was it at work? Yes. So we check to the next level. What was 3? Did we significantly aggravate, or did we, we get right down to, was it disabling, etc. So check down through all those things. Now, went back to ice. He was fine. Worked the next day just fine. Is it recordable at the end of the day? No, but we got to check through all those boxes until we get there. We had a worker to go to the doctor for a cut finger. The doctor prescribed a pain medication to be taken as needed. The worker never filled the prescription. Do we still need to record the accident? How many people say yes? How many people say no? Yes, the doctor prescribed it. Doesn't matter if you took it or not. If the prescription was there, we're following medical advice. They're supposed to take it. The only way you get rid of that is they contact the doctor or whatever, and they take away that prescription. Doctors really don't have time to chase a lot of that around unless they're an occupational doctor. So that's, going to be an issue. Our maintenance director was stung by a bee while inspecting the grounds yesterday. He's allergic to bees and carries an EpiPen with him. He gave himself an EpiPen shot, went to the emergency room, was able to return to work the next day. Do we need to record this? How many people say yes? How many people say no? Self-medication, right? He had his own issue, took care of it. We're good. John fainted while standing at a workbench, broke a rib. Turns out he forgot to take his diabetes medication this morning. Do we record the broken rib? Yeah, we have a break. So now we're into it. So yeah, that's recordable. All right, let's get to the form here. We have 3 forms, OSHA 300, 300A, and 301. Here's the 300 form. This is the one we're supposed to fill out during the year. We're supposed to keep track of all of our accidents. Notice column A, case number. That's pretty simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D, whatever you want to make that case number is up to you. I can't tell you how many calls I get every year next month when it's supposed to be posted from February 1st to the end of April. Do we call OSHA to get the case number, or what case number? No, you don't call OSHA. Make that your own. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, however many you got, list them down there. Employee's name. List the employee's name unless it's a privacy case. So if the person says, I don't want my information shared because I don't want people to know I got a needle stick injury. Needle stick injuries, sexual assault, anything to do with reproductive system, etc. Those are almost always privacy cases. So you would just say privacy case 1, privacy case 2, whatever, and then keep separate information. And that's, you have to follow HIPAA guidelines, make sure all that separate information is somewhere else. Date of injury, put it on there, date of injury. Next box, I believe that's what was the worker assigned to do. So if you only have one welder there and they ask for it to be a privacy case, and then you say it was the welder, guess what? You've just told everybody who that is. So again, you would just continue with the privacy case. If not, then you would just put in what they do, and then description of accident. So cut to the left pointer finger. Somebody have a question? I hear somebody's mic on. So somebody have a question? No?
I think we have someone who's unmuted. Krista Berry, could you please mute yourself? I'm unable to do it from this end.
Okay. No worries. Then when we get through G, H, I, and J, if you take a look at this box right here, G, H, I, and J, you have to use one. So was it death? If so, mark that one. Was it days away? If yes, and that's the most severe, mark that one. Is it a job transfer? You may have something that had days away from work that became a job transfer. We're going to mark the days away from work. That's the most severe thing that happened there. Then we go over to K and L. That's where we're going to put in our days. Okay. How many days were away? How many days were transferred? That's going to be important. So later on, if we get a request to do, what's your company's DART rate or TRIR or any of that sort of stuff, if you've ever gotten those questions, that's where that information is going to come from. And then box M over here, which everybody seems to forget. Was it an injury? Was it a skin disease? So you go right through here. What is it? All right. If you got a puncture and it received 3 stitches, that's probably going to be an injury, right? If you got, issues with TB because you're exposed to somebody with TB, that's going to be a disease that we have to record as well. So all this stuff gets taken care of all year. And then again, we have the month of January to kind of wrap this up. And then February 1st, we have to post this form. We post the 300A form. Now, when we gather the information, this is that 301 form that I told you about. If you don't use first report of accident, or you don't have an in-house accident investigation form that has at least this information, then you need to use this form. If you already get this information, which is pretty much boilerplate baseline information, then you do not have to use the 301 form. You can use your own, okay? And then we're going to go over to the 300A form. And if you look at the 300A form where all the slots are, so you see G, H, I, J, just go right back to the 300 form, right? You can see where G, H, I, J, all those are there, and then just roll it all the way to the bottom and what were your totals for each one of those. And that's what you'll transfer over to the 300A form. What is your company's establishment? What is the street address? What is the NAICS code? All right. How many people know what your NAICS code is? Raise your hand. Good, like 2 of you. Anybody else? Google what you do and NAICS code, and it should pop up, but make sure you take a look and it really is what you do. Okay, so make sure you get that. How many employees do you have every year? How many hours did you work? That, again, is all needed for when we calculate the DART rate or the TRIR or any of that sort of stuff. And then who signs it? Company executive. So what OSHA wants to see is the highest ranking company executive signs off on it. So is the highest ranking company executive the president or the CEO? Get him or her to sign off on it. All right. Because they want you to have that executive to understand what's going on. So if you have 10 accidents that year, they're signing off. They know there was 10 accidents that year. You had 380 days away from work. They should be, looking at this. Then it goes to being posted. So we have to keep it posted February 1st, end of April. Where does it get posted? Wherever your employees report to every day. So let's say we have multiple job sites because we're a construction company. Well, we have to have it in the office, and then we have to have it on those multiple job sites. Now, if you take a look at this slide, we talk about establishments that are there for more than a year. If that's a long-term project and it's a 2-year project or a 3-year project, it must keep its own OSHA 300 log for that project. It becomes a satellite location. Try to tell people to think of this like the Walmart rule. When you go back to use the bathroom at a Walmart and you see their OSHA 300A log up there, it's not for the country, it's for that Walmart or that Home Depot or that Lowe's or wherever you're going. It's that location, it's that satellite. Let's say people are assigned to that job for that full year, then they end up on that OSHA 300 form. How many of you have establishments with multiple locations? Raise your hand. A couple of you. Okay. So let's say I'm working at your location and I'm assigned to your location. So you're the place that's going to take my timesheets. You're the place where all my paperwork is. You're the place that, I report to. But you send me over to, we'll say, Chrissy's place, and I'm working for her for a week. And during that, I get injured. What OSHA 300 log gets updated? Home base, because I work for home base. I don't work under Chrissy's employment. Chrissy might have 10 employees or 20 employees under her. And again, if we bring them to home base and they get hurt, they'd be under Chrissy's log. So it's wherever you're assigned to is where it ends up. And an employee can only be assigned to one place. All right. That's what kind of construction people kind of get by with a little bit, because a lot of times only the supervisor is the one that stays there for the full year or 2 years or 3 years, however long that construction project is. Employees get moved in and out, so they just fall under the corporate structure. All right. Covered employees, again, if you employ them, if you tell them what to do, they're your employee. This gets a little fun when it gets to temporary labor, right? So if you provide supervision for that temporary labor and I hire 3 rental laborers for the day and one of them gets hurt, they end up on my OSHA 300 log. Why? Because I'm their supervisor for the day. Now, if I hire a supervisor with that team and I just tell that supervisor X needs to be done today, X, Y, and Z, and I don't give you a timeline, I don't tell you exactly how to do it, then you're a subcontractor. Then you stay with that temporary labor's OSHA 300 form. So that gets a little gray from time to time. If you're a company that has 9 employees and I hire 3 temporary laborers to help clean up the yard for a week, well, again, I didn't hire supervision. Now I went over 10. Now I have to do the OSHA 300 form. Okay. Hopefully you don't get any accidents and it's easy. You just zero everything out. It's very important that you have accurate records. All right. One of the most frequently cited standards for 2020, 1,200 plus citations for not using proper records. A lot of that was not actually reporting that to the OSHA website. We have, again, until March 2nd, if you're in construction or one of those high hazard areas, or you have over the limited number of employees that they put out on OSHA's website. Again, OSHA.gov, and it's one of the first things that'll flash at the front of the page is, online record keeping. So you can go there and sign up your account, and upload your forms if you need to. All right. And are you maintaining it for the past 5 years? You can update forms. Somebody asked me earlier, if I have more days to add, can I add it this year? Yeah, you have to maintain those forms for 5 years. All right. So that person maxes out in June of this year for the 180 days, update the last form that says 180 days. They're still on it. Post that summary. Again, it has to be posted wherever people are. If you have multiple projects, it has to go out there too. Why do they say it needs to be posted from February to April? Is that the time that OSHA is going to come and look for it? No, not at all. That's just the time of year that your employees have a chance to review this form. The whole idea is that if I just got hired and I walk by your form and it says you had 3 fatalities last year, nobody told me anybody, unfortunately died here, I may raise a flag and ask what the heck went on, right? I may say, did I get hired for one of those positions? How am I going to, how'd that person get killed? I don't want to do it. All right. OSHA can ask for the past, and they usually ask for your past 5 years OSHA 300 forms when they do an OSHA citation anyways. Just copy your safety program, copy of training records, OSHA 300 forms for the last 5 years. Always send 300A first, unless they push you to send them the 300 form. I always try to stay with the 300A as much as possible. Maintain for 5 years, keep them up to date. All right, reporting requirements. You have a fatality. Person goes to the hospital Friday. You call the hospital, they won't release information. And this is kind of normal. They won't release information because you're not family. Well, Monday morning, you find out that person passed away. And you find out when you walked in at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, now you have 8 hours. The clock is ticking for you to call OSHA and report that fatality. Okay. There's an accident, work-related. They're going to be an inpatient hospitalization. What does that mean? Doesn't mean treated and released back in, cattle call, as I call it, the triage area where they set you up in curtains. you were actually admitted to the hospital, or, we had one person that swore up and down the person was never admitted, but yet had surgery at the hospital. That person was admitted, I promise you. You got to make sure within 24 hours of an amputation, loss of an eye, or inpatient hospitalization that you contact OSHA and you let them know. All right. As the employer. Now, if you're a general contractor and you have somebody get hurt under you as a subcontractor, is that subcontractor's responsibility. On the GC, I have that paving crew that we talked about earlier that's asked a few good questions. They had an injury. It sent somebody to the hospital and it was inpatient. It's not up to me as the GC to report it. It's up to that paving contractor, right? All right. You call the the nearest OSHA office, or you can always use the 1-800-321-OSHA line if you need to. All right. Inpatient hospitalization, again, it's beyond treatment in the emergency room. Treatment in the emergency room, they leave, may not be reportable. All right. Or you don't have to call in. All right. We talked about the fatality. We're going to get past that because we are cruising for time here. I want to give you some time. Again, if it's a vehicle accident, you do not have to report the vehicle accident. Now, submitting OSHA records. Again, we have until March 2nd. Establishments with 20 to 249 in classified industries, which all of construction is one of those classified industries. So if you're in construction, you have more than 20 employees, you have to post them to OSHA's website. If you have 250 or more and you're not in one of those certain industries, you also come into this, right? It's submitting your 300A form by March 2nd. I know at least 6 over the past 3 years that have been cited for not doing so. So make sure you get it in there. OSHA.gov/injury reporting/index.html is the website. You can take a look at that, take a picture of it, do whatever you need to do, or just go to OSHA.gov. And again, it's going to scroll through to the top right now because it's one of their hot topics. That and COVID are going to be scrolling back and forth. All right. COVID record keeping. The big thing to remember about record keeping with COVID, it's a little different, is when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I got COVID, I'm not sure if it was at work or not. At that point, you have to do an investigation. You have to ask questions. It's very hard to prove that it's work-related currently because it's so widely spread. So questions like, have you been in public areas without a mask on in the past, 2 weeks? Have you had any family gatherings where, everybody didn't wear a mask in the past 2 weeks? Almost everybody checks one of those boxes. At that point, it's very hard to say that's work-related. Okay, it's almost next to impossible. Now, I had one client, 12 people in the office, 11 got COVID. It's very hard, and all at the same time. Pretty much one person got it, 2 days later, everybody was sick. Only one person who was away for travel did not get COVID. That's pretty hard to explain my way out and say 11 people accidentally got exposed somewhere other than work. So then, yes, they're going to end up on your caseload. They're going to end up jacking up your hours and days off away, so yeah, it can definitely be an issue. So those will be cited. This is an older slide because it says it spreads mainly among unvaccinated. Now they're finding out unvaccinated, vaccinated, doesn't matter. It's still getting spread. So that's becoming an issue. Make sure you understand that if it is work related, you follow everything that we have here. They're going to probably get medication. They're probably going to have all the other stuff. So they're probably going to have 10 days off plus without, off of work, depending. The new standard that just came out from CDC said 5 days, right? 5 days, you're not showing symptoms. You can go back to work, but you have to stay masked for 5 more days. So whatever that might be, you're going to have to follow that protocol. CDC has been changing protocols. As soon as they can figure out something better, they switch it out again. This has been a difficult at best situation for the past 2 years with COVID. Let's see here. Right. Why not record the flu or other illnesses? Because they already have a exception for that. TB, COVID, different things like that. Those things get recorded. if it can be traced back into work. Again, one thing we talked about before is, what if somebody unfortunately ends up dying from COVID? That's part of the reporting process. You have 8 hours from the time you find out they passed away. Now, they may have issues from COVID that last a week, a month, 6 months. OSHA has taken away the amount of time between the actual exposure and accident. If they're continuing issues with COVID and they pass away due to COVID, you still have to report it as a fatality. You still have to call it in as a fatality. So you still have that 8 hour rule. Again, they've also excluded reactions to the vaccinations. So if you are a company that pushes for vaccinations, or you're over 100 and you're required vaccinations or testing, then you can definitely have issues there. And how do you do the testing, right? How hard is it to find testing kits right now? I can give you a source if you want. Same person we use for our drug testing source, Judy Swartley with Red Planet, also has some available testing kits that you can do at the house, but you're going to have to come up with what you're using and how you're using it. All right. You can look up the OSHA ETS. I showed that during the last session. Emergency temporary standard. Again, you're going to have a program in place, right? If you're 100 or more, you're still going to have a program in place. When OSHA shows up, that's going to be part of the enforcement program. So what are you doing about it? How are you educating your people? How are you protecting them from it? You know, the vaccination, whether or not to do the vaccination or testing, that's 100 or more. Having the program, all employers, right? Especially in Virginia, that's been around. Any questions? I know I ran past my teaching time. Sorry, that's a long presentation. I kind of shortcut it a little bit, but please, any questions, key up your mic, put it in the chat box. I'll be happy to answer it.
Question over here.
Sure.
If the employee that was injured and it's a recordable case, there was no job transfer or days away from work, but in the hours when they would have been going back to work, they then had to also take off for an unrecordable COVID case. How do you determine if you would still need to put days away or not?
If they would have been back to work and they were released by the doctor to come back to work, but then they got COVID, then
yes,
and it's a home deal, then they stop when they got their day that they were supposed to be back. It's just like if an employee is told by a doctor that they can be back in 48 hours and they refuse to come back in 48 hours because they still don't feel like they should come back, but they didn't go back to the doctor to get that extended. They just decided to take it off. You don't count those days off. You count what the doctor tells you. So we always follow the doctor's advice. If you're under 100 employees and get COVID, do you need to record it on the? Yes. The 100 only applies to the vaccination testing rule. Okay. So it doesn't matter if you're 10 employees. If it's, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? Sure. Email me. I put my email in the chat box and I'll be happy to send you a copy of my presentation. That's not a problem. If it's work related and you prove that it's work related, doesn't matter how big you are, you have to put it on your 300 form. Other questions? Got some good ones here. Don't be shy. If you have a question, probably 5 other people probably have that same question. They just don't want to key up their mic or type it in the chat box. So don't be scared to reach out. Do you have any questions that are safety related other than recordability? I'll be happy to do that. Do you have a copy of the COVID log? The COVID log. The OSHA 300 log, is that what you're talking about? If that's what you want, go to OSHA.gov or just Google fillable OSHA 300, 300A, 301, and you can download. It's basically like an Excel format. And when you keep stuff on the 300 log, when you come up to the time for the 300A, it'll already be there for you. So it keeps track of all that. So all you have to do is print it out and get it signed. On the OSHA website, I'm going to end the show and see if I still have the other one pulled up here from this morning. If you weren't here this morning, share. There's a few resources on OSHA's website. I do not have it pulled up anymore. I apologize. On OSHA's website, if you just Google ETS, OSHA, COVID, there's a bunch of resources, question and answers, sample programs. There's a sample program if you're 100% vaccination mandate. There's a sample program if you're vaccination or testing with face coverings mandate. And there's some hot links to the general industry standards, that 1910 501 to 509. So all that's on there. If you can't find it again, I will shoot me an email. I saw a couple people asking me to get copies of different things that are doing the direct message. Shoot me an email. Here's my email address. I'll put it in right now because I won't have a copy of this chat when we're done. So pretty simple. SafetyMurph13@AOL.com. I've had that for 20 some years. I think I'm one of the last dinosaurs that have the AOL, but I'm there. If your email doesn't allow AOL because they don't think it exists anymore, I have the same thing, SafetyMurph13@gmail.com. I just don't check it as often.
Hey Matt, did you put that into the chat? Your
Yes.
email?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
At the beginning of it. I'll do it again. That's fine. I'll put it in again right now.
Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah.
Yep. So Safety Murph 13. And then my cell phone number, if you ever have a safety question and you want to reach out, by all means, you're more than welcome to call me, leave me a message, text me, whatever. That's the way you can get a hold of me. We've been I would say industry partner with Preferred for years, but it feels like, we've been with them for so long. It's just like, anything Preferred needs, Seeing can help them out with. So it's been a good relationship. We appreciate it.
Hey, real quick. So it was at AOL, or what was the other one you said?
Gmail.
Okay.
Yep. Other questions? Am I missing any? I don't see the chat box right now, Chastity. So am I missing any?
Nope, we've got them all.
Great. Well, again, I appreciate everybody who came out. Again, the information's there. If you need more information, contact me. I'll be happy to get it to you. I can't thank you enough for taking advantage of when we put these classes together. It's always fun to work with Preferred, and they always seem to come up with good topics for us to teach on. And hopefully it was informative. So if it was informative or you learned something, raise your hand. Woo, good. I like that. It's always more a better thing to leave knowing people learn something. So we appreciate it. You have any follow-ups there, Jesse?
Yep. Thank you, Matt. It was very informative. I know I learned things for sure. So I appreciate it. And we also appreciate the partnership. And again, if anybody has any questions, reach out to Matt. We will be posting on our YouTube channel, and a link will go out in the same mailer that you got the original invitation, giving you links to the YouTube channel and both of these discussions if you ever want to refer back to them. And that should come out probably in the next week.
Perfect. If you don't mind sharing those links, we'll put them on the C-Inc website too.
Absolutely.
cinconline.com. Very good. Well, we appreciate it. Have a great day. Stay safe. And again, if you have anything, just reach out.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye all.
Thanks, Matt.